fight. We don't have to kill. Everybody in the whole wide world really just needs to chill. No, we don't have to fuss, no, we don't have to fight.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Just Chill with Oliver George. This is episode number 53, and my guest this week is an extremely insightful man. He's an emotionally focused therapist with a master's degree in counseling psychology, amongst many other amazing accomplishments. So suffice to say, I learned a ton from this episode and from our chat, as I often do from these great conversations that I'm lucky enough to be privy to doing this show. But before we sink our teeth into this conversation, I wanted to acknowledge a couple of things. First of all, pandemic hair, don't care. But second of all, more importantly, if you're watching on YouTube, you might have noticed this free space I now have in front of me. That's because the plexiglass barrier is now a thing of the past. If you follow the show, you might know that last summer was when it first went up. There was a bit of a lull here in Ontario where our COVID numbers went down for a bit in the summer and things started opening up again. It started to seem plausible for us to do face-to-face interviews for a bit. But we took a lot of precautions. My dad was always rocking an N95 mask and we threw that bad boy up. But really it became irrelevant because we haven't done an in-studio interview since the end of November. But you may have noticed in all of my intros for my Zoom chats, I would always still have that plexiglass up. And that's because it became more of like a symbolic thing for me. I kind of told myself I'll get rid of the plexiglass when I really feel that light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm so happy to report that that's where we're at now. I'm fully vaccinated, but more importantly, my 65-year-old dad who sits in studio when we do this stuff, he's fully vaccinated. And a lot of the potential guests I'm reaching out to are in the same boat. So it really does feel like the risk factor's coming down to a point where we can do this in a really, really safe way again. And I am so excited. I'm still going to do Zoom interviews when it's applicable. You know, sometimes I've learned to love them because sometimes the opportunities they present are just great. Not everyone's always going to be in Ottawa wanting to come to my basement in Nepean, you know. So I realize the beauty of being able to chat with people that are at faraway distances. But I would be lying if I said that I wasn't just ecstatic about being able to sit eye to eye with somebody and do it old school at the green table here. So I'm beyond excited to announce that. And there's actually some crazy interviews that I've already got set up for later this summer that I am not going to spoil here because I don't generally like to jinx that kind of shit. But I'm ecstatic about that too. So I really can't wait to share all that crazy news with you. Anyways, now for the usual spiel. If you are watching this on YouTube right now and you would prefer audio only, you can get that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, many other places like that. Contrary to that, though, if you are listening to my voice on one of those platforms and you didn't know that there was a visual side to the show, then I encourage you to please come check it out on YouTube. While you're there, or if you're watching on YouTube right now, could you please subscribe? I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers right now, and I'm currently at like 940, I think, at the time of this recording. So every person really makes a huge difference to me, and I've had so much fun connecting with people that have reached out to me. So keep it up, and thank you so much if you've already supported the show. Speaking of reaching out to me, though, if you want to hit me up, I will reply to you. So send me an email. It's justchillpodcasting@gmail.com. Back to the guest of this episode, though, as I mentioned, an extremely intelligent man. His name is Mitchell Smolkin. We did not know each other. We were connected through a mutual party, and I'm so glad that we were because the chat really just kept blowing my mind. Not only was he such a down-to-earth, really chill, easy guy to talk to, but he knew so much. Obviously, his credentials speak for themselves. He was just wise, extremely wise. You know, that was the best way I could describe it. The pivots and the changes in the conversation were also really fun. We spoke for like an hour and 40 minutes or something, and it was kind of all over the place. So beyond his therapy credentials, though, he's a musician, he's an author, he's a speaker. He was reaching me from his office in Sweden, which was also super interesting. So I'm really, really excited for you to check out this chat and everything we talked about. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you.
Hello.
Hey there.
Oh, you can hear me all right?
Yeah, you hear me too?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Cool.
That smooth podcasting voice coming through loud and clear.
How are
thanks,
you?
Man. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
I want to thank
tired.
you.
It's late over here.
Oh, yeah. This is the first thing I was going to ask you is which office were you in right now? So you're in Sweden?
Yeah, I'm in Stockholm.
Oh, cool. What time is it there?
10.
10. Okay. Yeah, it's getting late.
Where are you?
I'm in Ottawa.
Oh, sweet.
So yeah, 4 p.m. here. But thanks for taking the time, especially then if you're staying up late for me, man.
My family, my father and grandmother were born in Perth,
Oh, cool. Very close. Yeah.
and then my grandparents lived in Ottawa for years, right in front of Herringate Mall.
Oh, right on. Cool. Yeah, I'm out in Nepean, so I'm West End.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
Nepean.
I also want to give a shout out to Randy Phipps for helping connect us here because even just starting to get into your stuff, I'm super excited to talk to you because you seem like a really interesting individual and very
Oh,
intelligent.
thank you.
So yeah, a lot I want to go over. I'm hoping I can fit it all in, but
Sure.
I want to apologize for going all casual Friday on you here, but in Ontario,
I'm in the same boat, buddy.
yeah, well, normally a man with your credentials, I would try and spiff it up a bit, but Ontario, they just opened retail stuff today and I still can't get a haircut for another month. So I'm rocking the hockey look with the little mullet action.
I'm seeing everybody have their first beer in a patio in like a year, and they're like, it's.
Yeah. It's like a miracle. Yeah.
My parents had breakfast for the first time on a patio this morning, and they were like, you'd think they were meeting like the Pope.
Well, yeah, when it gets taken away like that, you
Of
realize
course.
how much
No,
you
of
miss it.
course.
Yeah.
Of course.
I actually want to talk to you about being in Sweden during the pandemic because I read an interview that you were a part of, and it was really interesting because Sweden had a unique perspective on how they chose to handle the pandemic situation. But before I do that, I want to give my audience a bit of a feel for all of your amazing accomplishments. You're a psychotherapist, an emotionally focused therapist with a master's degree in counseling psychology. You're also an author. You're a speaker, an actor, a musician, a man who wears many, many hats. So, I don't even know where to begin, but you've also launched a podcast now called The Dignity of Suffering, which I listened to the preliminary intro episode and wow, it's, I'll get into that when we get into that. But am I missing anything here as far as your accreditations?
No, that's great.
Cool.
That's a nice introduction.
Yes, man. Well, there's so much to cover. So being in Sweden, though, I do want to touch on that because I thought it was super interesting that they basically took a really relaxed approach when it came to restrictions. They said, old people, you stay home, let's try and stay away from each other, but they didn't really shut anything down. And you would call back to your parents in Ontario and it was kind of like Twilight Zone almost.
It's still, it just kept going. Like the Twilight Zone just kept getting more and more real because as the fatigue set in and as, people had their different opinions about lockdown, et cetera, I don't know. I didn't really know how to talk about it. Right. I remember I was lying in the beginning. I'd be like going to yoga or something and I'd be like, they'd be like, hey, what you doing? I'm like, I'm going for a walk.
Oh, man.
And still now I don't feel all that comfortable, sharing that things have really remained open. I've gone to my office, restaurants remained open. It's a complicated discussion, I think, because there are so many factors and more people, the mortality rate was higher. And I was sitting here this morning with a friend and her friend, both their parents died in the early 70s. And so it's complicated, right? It's but on the other hand, I was also reading an article today about people whose businesses, stayed open, even thrived, and so it's just complicated, right?
Yeah,
it's a balancing act. But the truth is that we've been living in a very different world. And I'm not, I can't say that I was sorry for that because it was nice. It felt good to be able to have a certain degree of freedom. On the other hand, like I said, it's complicated.
Well, I was going to ask you, if you had any moments where you're, maybe panicking a bit or feeling afraid of getting sick, especially when you're watching the rest of the world sort of batten down the hatches and then, business as usual for the most part where you are.
Well, I had COVID, and actually here it's less a matter of who that didn't have it versus who that had. So it was interesting to watch, and I joked with our neighbors yesterday. I watched, I think, like Nova Scotia, or one of the provinces in Canada, was like, "Oh, we have 60 cases. We're shutting down." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "Oh, we have 60 cases on our block." Oh man! And that's not. I know it sounds weird and maybe a bit cavalier, but it's true. And literally friends, the director of the clinic, my neighbors, the friend I run with. Really, it was quite widespread.
Wow. And was it, I mean, it impacts everyone very differently, it would seem. So what was the, course for you? Was it brutal, or were you, was it somewhat mild?
No, I luckily had a mild, like a cold. There was, for a while I do like some relatively long distance running and stuff like that. And I felt after my runs, there was, a cough, and I had one friend here that I almost lost. And, wow. And she spent 6 weeks in the ICU, and she was gone. Like, she said she saw her relatives, like dead relatives around the hospital bed, that the whole deal.
The other side, yeah.
And so I had a chance to sit with her, and, and I don't know how many people I've ever sat with where someone's telling me a story like that. That was pretty intense. And I remember when, so luckily for me, it was mild, and, but yeah, so certainly a different reality in many ways. And, but not to betray the fact that many scientists, people I work with, were very upset. There was a group of 20 scientists that wrote open letter to the government, and some of them had to leave the country because they received so much vitriol and pushback for calling it out. So it's interesting because people think of Sweden, like ABBA, and everyone, all the kids get food at school, and but it really showed a different side to the country, and a kind of complexity that I think people don't normally associate with this country. And a lot of division, and the last thing I'll say, which doesn't speak highly of the country, is that I had certain clients who were of a visible minority. One client's husband was Korean, and he stopped going outside because early on, if he wore a mask, people would yell at him, and it made him uncomfortable, and he would not go out. And so,
because he was wearing a mask.
He was wearing a mask. Yes. Yeah. There was no adoption of widespread mask wearing here at any stage. Only,
even with that, though, you would think it's a bit extreme to actually be bothered by someone wearing a mask, even if it's not, the norm or whatever. Like, why I wouldn't care if someone walked by. That's like being bothered by someone wearing a pink shirt or some other arbitrary thing,
Well, I think it was like an out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. So I think when people wore masks, they were these kind of little pockets of reminding everybody else that actually was going on. And I think it raised people's anxiety level, and that could come out in awful ways.
They wanted to kind of just, block it all out.
Totally. And really only like 3 months ago, did the government say, wear it on the subway. 3 months ago.
Wow. Oh my God. Well,
so that's, different, another planet. Like I wrote in the National Post, like another planet.
Well, I'm glad you've got those sweet antibodies now, at least. And that you,
yes. Yeah. And I've been vaccinated too. And, we're, So we're about on par with Canada in that respect.
Nice. Yeah. I'm fully vaxxed now. My dad's he just got a second shot recently. So in a couple of weeks, we're hoping to start doing in-studio stuff again, if we can find guests that are vaccinated.
Willing
so that's very exciting. I haven't done an in-studio interview since like November. Yeah. Different vibe. Not that I'm not enjoying these as well. I can talk to people in Sweden, but there is something to be said about, looking someone in the eyes and sitting across the table from them.
Yeah, no, I've got to see patients in person the whole time.
That's great. That's one upside.
I guess so. I mean, but it is true, right? That flow never stopped. But these kinds of conversations, I guess, as a friend said yesterday, 3, 4, 5 years, when they look back, it'll be clearer, what happened to different countries. And
yeah, that's true. We'll be able to see through the fog a bit more. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to, on the vein of the pandemic, then I wanted to talk about the effects that it's been having on couples, both old and new, because obviously this has been an extremely difficult time for almost everybody, but it could really put a strain on relationships. So I want to know, what are the most prevalent issues and problems that you've been consistently seeing amongst couples that you've been treating during this time?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I've been speaking a lot about it. And truly, there's a huge range. But I think the way to think about it, or the way that I think about it, is that, couples are like systems. It may seem like a very, sterile metaphor, but I often think of like, the water mains of a city or something, or, how on a beautiful day, no one's thinking about the plumbing. No one's thinking, but when there's a massive weather event,
Yeah.
and you go outside and bridges are flooding, and you really see the weaknesses and where, on a very kind of foundational level. And that's, I think, when we talk about the pandemic, in light of other sort of events that affect relationships, it just begins to really show weaknesses in the system. And because the pandemic was so prolonged, because people, even here, right? I mean, I spoke earlier about all the freedoms we had, but people did take it seriously. People worked from home. I work in mental health, so it was a bit different, but the vast majority of people were home. And so many, 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 many couples I worked with, we're on top of each other. Many moved and bought bigger places halfway through because they couldn't stand, understandably, being so close. And that's not a reflection so much on a bad relationship. It's just stressful. If you have if you're in the heat, if you're in the heat for 10 days, it can really stress you out. So the range of things that I've seen, I mean, in some cases, just to start with, the first thing that comes to mind is that for people maybe that didn't realize that they struggled with intimacy, for instance, or have a hard time talking about negative emotions, and maybe during normal times are busy, they're at work or going out on the weekend or just doing stuff, traveling. Lots of people travel for work. A lot of people, when they're home and maybe dealing now with feeling a bit claustrophobic, maybe trying to, I remember I was homeschooling my son very briefly. Our son's school closed here, and I had to teach him to play the recorder. And I thought I had patience. I'm like, I think I'm a patient guy. And then now that I had to, I lasted 5 minutes, tears are coming in his eyes. And I was like, holy moly. I thought I had, I talk about parenting, and it was like one of the most humbling experiences. And so, to feel maybe that kind of humiliation or struggling or frustration, and then to not be able to kind of put into language, if someone's used to, I don't know, turning away from the relationship, going out, reading a book, if you're used to not verbalizing these things, that's a problem. And it distance starts to creep in, and a lot of couples, the fire alarm went off. It was like, oh, we don't, under normal circumstances, we might be okay. Yeah. So it's like a catalyst, like when couples have a child and now they're not sleeping, there's really a lot of evidence.
Limits and tests, totally. Your mettle of can you handle this? Yeah. It's when you realize that the infrastructure might not be as solid as you thought it was because you've been peppering your life with so many distractions that you never really have to address it. I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is actually, I think it's really normal, right? When a couple meets and has that honeymoon, oh, we're soulmates, I see myself in your eyes. We need that. Mm-hmm. If a couple can look into the crystal ball and see all the stuff they're going to go through, you run out of the bar. You're like, thank you. You're really hot. Nice to meet you. I'm out of here. Yeah. So the fact that we sort of, bask in the glow of that initial honeymoon, we need that stuff. And normally that can follow a pretty maybe you take time to date, you get married, then you have kids. The pandemic for a lot of couples, especially young couples, it's like right away you're together. International couples that maybe had long distance relationships might say, you know what, let's just move in together because we can't travel.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of that too. People are like, oh, I didn't know what it was like to have somebody around for so long.
Yeah. Well, when it first hit, the pandemic, I mean, it must have been quite the make or break moment for a lot of relationships that were sort of on the cusp of, do we move in? Do we take this to the next level? And, right. They started having to conceptualize what that might actually be like, or trying it out. And, it really, I think, it would go one way or the other in a lot of those situations. It's going to totally. Kind of, make or break them.
Yeah. Some big decisions that maybe you have more of the luxury of time to figure out certainly had to be made. And I feel like it took time. I feel like it wasn't about until halfway through that I was like, oh, yeah, people are coming in and specifically talking about the pandemic. In the beginning, people would ask me, oh, is it busier or are people more stressed? And I was like, no, feels normal. So it seemed like it was, the way the water kind of laps against the shore, it eventually takes time to erode, and then people were kind of realizing that maybe it was having an impact. But for others, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, people, I think we're having that even on a personal level, like relationships aside. I know I personally had I don't know how far in it was, maybe 9 months or a year, but I had a breaking point that kind of the pandemic finally caught up with me. And I just sort of for a few months was really distraught and kind of feeling aimless and really just what's the point of it all, going through the motions kind of thing. Happy to say I've come out of that tailspin. But I think that happened to a lot of people where everyone's got their own sort of breaking point and you're watching people every day. It's somebody else is reaching their limit.
Yeah, we're fragile, right? We're fragile. And I think that exposed a lot of that. And when I talk about being distracted by going out or going to work, like, I don't mean that's a bad thing. I mean, that's great that we have that stuff in our life.
Of course.
And sometimes it moves slowly, right? Like, I think I'll change jobs, but usually it doesn't all happen at once, that you have your kids at home, you're working from home, and people, many lost their jobs. Lots of artists, were
small business owners and stuff.
Business. Yeah. I mean, we're just, so I'm not knocking the fact that we have a variety of things that keep us entertained and existentially a bit more comforted. But when you're laid bare like that, I think it really does require, it's like going from maybe singing Happy Birthday to having to play like Beethoven, like overnight emotionally. I mean, in a relationship, and so people had to, I guess, learn how to really cope with bigger and more darker emotions in many ways.
Well, and for a lot of couples, all of a sudden, both being at home, like you said, especially if you've got kids, there's some truth in a lot of relationships to the adage of absence makes the heart grow fonder. There is, you go to work all day and then you're like, oh, hey, it's really great to see your face again. There's some value to that, I think.
Yeah.
But, I feel like my relationship did fine during the pandemic because we spent the majority of our time together pre-pandemic. We were always playing board games and always, like it's who do I want to hang out with? I'm always picking her, So I think that kind of a bond, if you had that going into the pandemic, really was able to shine and be reinforced even more, going like, wow, look at us, not to, belittle the people who didn't have such an easy time, but I was proud of my relationship to be able to be like, wow, look at us and everything we're enduring. And I should preface by saying she's an ICU nurse. I also have a job at the hospital. So there was that extra tension, especially at the beginning when no one knew what the heck was going on. So,
No, I think, absolutely. Many, many couples went in. I mean, it's sort of advocating kind of for the same thing, right? That many went into it and it brought them closer. I traveled, I was coming back to Canada every month before. And this is the longest that I've been in Sweden without leaving. And it was really nice to find myself at home, sometimes on the weekend, like not packing for a trip, just making dinner, or it was really nice. So I think you're right. We have to point out that many couples just liked having time, and also many people who are more introverted. It took the pressure, like it reduced anxiety in relationships. If one person likes to make plans and go out and program stuff for the kids, and that's a source of conflict. For many couples, it was like, oh, look, can't do anything. Isn't this great? And it kind of reduced some of those disagreements. So it certainly had a positive side as well.
Well, for an artistic perspective as well, I think if you're like, I do comedy, music, stuff like that. And I know a lot of other people that are into those things. And I think that there's the downside of course, we can't perform right now, but there's this vast amount of time where you can be crafting your next for when we finally can go back up. So I found that to be a bit of a silver lining myself. Like, okay, I'm doing crafts and hobbies that I've been putting on the shelf for a while, and I'm putting, focus back into fitness and other things like that. So it's really about how you choose to perceive the situation. I mean, obviously there's a lot of downsides, but you can try to find those little hidden nuggets of positivity.
Yeah. And I like that idea, right? I mean, it's hard. I found it hard at some point, especially with all the stories coming out of people being sick and illness. It was tough to sort of rationalize that idea of like, oh, this is kind of like a crossroads. Maybe it's time to do something else. And certainly many of my artist friends were writing and saying, oh, so what, you're a lawyer? And someone's like, hey, why don't you sell shoes? Or like, Like there was that sort of people saying, oh, maybe it's time for you to, do something else with your life. And someone's like, no, I spent 30 years building my career as a touring musician. I understand you think this sucks for me.
Yeah.
But your advice to now all of a sudden, I don't know, learn to be a nurse.
Yeah. Start your life over. It'll be easy.
Right. So I was a bit but on the other hand, look, I started a podcast. I started writing more, certainly, things develop for me too. And I think you're right that if well, there's that cliche, right? Like life throws you lemons,
Yeah. Throw them back and ask for a water. Yeah. It's healthier probably than lemonade. I want to know then, okay, what are your best dating tips rather relationship tips for people that, are maybe used to having more social interaction, date nights and stuff like that, but all the things that we can't really do right now and that couples may be finding themselves at these impasses? What's the best advice you could give or words of wisdom?
Yeah, it's a great question. To be honest, it may not seem like the answer one might expect, but I interviewed a Canadian last week, and the podcast comes out next week on Tuesday. I interviewed Gabor Mate, who's just launched a film called The Wisdom of Trauma, and he's writing a new book, and he's a celebrated Canadian author and writer on trauma. And I need to start here because it feels to me a little facile to sort of tell couples that maybe, couldn't go out for over a year to sort of, skip over the fact that there may be a kind of disorientation or sadness or helplessness that maybe one has to sort of address first. And, what Gabor Mate wrote an op-ed at the beginning of the pandemic, and he said, look, just let yourself be sad, let yourself kind of feel some of the feelings. And the reason that I answer that, to a question about dating is that, it's the quality of the relationship that dictates the quality of the time that you spend together. Sure. And so, so if there's distance between you or you're having a hard time acknowledging how you feel, no advice about doing stuff together in a different way is going to make a difference, because it's the time that we spend together and the quality of that, whether we're out, whether we're at home playing board games, whether we're just lying in bed and reading together. It's that, it's the comfort level we have that I think underscores whether that feels, good. Yeah. And so for starters, if couples are struggling or really feeling like they're now roommates because they, haven't, for instance, been able to go and do what they normally do, or things that invigorate the relationship, I think first you just have to kind of just have an honest reckoning of like with the feeling of feeling distant, or the disappointment that maybe things you love to do have been taken away. And then to be honest, I think at that point, couples really know what to do, meaning if you're close or you feel like a team, or, then like you said, you do what you love, playing board games, watching movies, reading books, just talking, so I think ultimately if there really is a genuine struggle, or the relationship is scared in some way because it feels like you haven't been able to do what you do that recharges your batteries, it's almost like you have to talk about that fear first, and almost everything else will, everything else kind of, will unfold from there. Because when you're close and you trust somebody, compromising and coming up with things to do is a lot easier than when you feel adversarial or distant, right? Though that's really what drives, I think, indecision, or these kind of blame dances that tend to take over relationships.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's cheesy, but I feel like your partner should really be your best friend, at least in theory. You might have difficult patches, but if you don't feel that, at least me personally, I don't know why you would want to be married to that person, or obviously things can dissolve over time and not be what they once were. So that's a different story. But going into it, if you're starting up a relationship, deciding to move in or deciding to take the next level, whatever that may be, you really should look and say, is this person my best friend? And if the answer is not yes, then maybe reevaluate.
For sure. And I maybe have a bit of a skewed perspective, since I work with literally thousands of couples, and for me, the notion of best friend and trust, it's like a dynamic process, right? the best friend thing for me, it just gets deeper and sweeter over time. But, the roadblocks are when I think the closeness, like the best friend closeness, brings up strong feelings or memories or things that are hard to talk about. And that's, as a couples therapist, what I see. To your point, attachment is so strong, and hitching yourself to the wagon in a relationship raises the stakes, and the emotions in relationships are much stronger than colleagues very often, or strangers that we have a great chat with. And people often are confused, especially if they're having a hard time in their relationship. They're like, look, I have an easier time talking to my colleague at work or a stranger I met in the cafe. I come home and it feels hard or inorganic. Yeah. And I'm like, well, of course it does, because like you said, you're that much closer to the person. So maybe someone you meet in a cafe, it's like, yeah, they're shining a little flashlight on your life, and you're telling them, I don't know,
invested in the same way. Like there's so much riding on a marriage. Like I've been through a divorce, and I'm happy to say, I feel like I say this a lot on my show, but we're great now. My ex and I, we share my oldest two and all that. But it was not an easy thing to go through. And I'm happy that it happened to me, though, because the trauma and sort of to your podcast theme, the trauma of that experience ended up being very beneficial to have to face all those things and have to be alone and to have to say, and also the idea of breaking up the family was so keeping me from taking that step until it was eventually sort of forced upon me. And I had to just roll with it, when she was like, I'm out. But I remember feeling that way of just like, oh, I can't do this. Our kids are young, like it'll destroy their lives. And in the end, it's like been so much better for them, So there's so many layers to relationships and marriage. And like you were saying, once you get enamored with someone and best friends and all those layers, it becomes such a fixture of your life that you kind of hold on tight because you're afraid the world will fall apart if you lose that tent pole that's holding everything up,
Yeah, it's high voltage, right? The decisions, like you're saying. And I like what you said, because I think whether one does separate, whether one wrestles through it, the point is that these experiences stretch us in incredible ways. And that's something I think that we just have to normalize, because I think I know I did many times as my relationship took turns, and, we freak out, right? We freak out at these moments when it doesn't feel the way it did. And there's something about, I guess, just talking openly about it, to expect these fears and expect for things to really change, and, and just try our best to put language to it, so that either, as you're pointing out, we can get closer, or, if it really is hurting us and not working, that we can acknowledge it and make a different decision.
Yeah. And hopefully move forward with that decision on decent terms where you're not clawing each other's throats out, because I mean, there was a bit of that animosity when I first got separated, but I feel like we moved past it pretty quick, because you really the turning point was when we each found new respective partners. And then there was no more jealousy about, oh, you're dating someone, but I'm not, or you've moved on and I'm still wallowing or whatever, So once we both found new partners, it really, really was a huge turning point.
Yeah. And I spoke to a good friend today. We hadn't caught up in a while, and he's separated from his wife. And he also shared that they are very amicable. They have a kid together. And I was just super happy for him, right? Because that's not easy, but it's great. It's great if you can do it. And I mean, we don't want these things in our life that, that are there constantly, picking at us. And that's hard.
Yeah, no, I always count my blessings. I feel like I'm one of the lucky ones, because I've met many people that I know that are in not so amicable post-marriage situations. And, my heart goes out to them, because it's not easy to navigate. And sometimes people get really petty and really, just trying to hurt the other person because they can't get over the fact that it's over, or whatever the situation may be. But I definitely feel lucky for being able to, come out to a place where.
And just to zoom out from that, right? I mean, what I hear you saying, and what I think, we need to acknowledge, is how important and how much people affect us. Mm-hmm. How much time do we spend reflecting on exactly that, right? Like how often divorce, can demand so much energy, never mind, these legal battles that can go on forever. Yeah. And I think what we're just saying, and lots of people come into my office, and we don't want to be affected by somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. There's this idea of like codependency, and someone's like, no, I should be able to regulate my own emotions. And yeah, there's some truth to that we have to, have resources, but we cannot deny the impact that other people have on us.
Yeah.
And I think if we can just acknowledge that and feel safe with that, that's already a step further to just normalizing how, crazy sometimes relationships can make us feel.
Yeah.
And,
I feel like I was not the prototypical teenager with getting into dating and stuff, because I was right away, right out of the gates. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted, quality,
me too.
growth and all that. And I was somewhat of a serial monogamist, jumping from one to the next. But I think I dated one girl for, most of high school. It was like end of grade 10 to beginning of grade 12. So
that's exactly what I did.
Oh, yeah. And well, I remember it being a bit disorienting at the beginning of grad year, because all of a sudden I was single, and during this time where I had been with this one person, all my friends had been dating other girls and, racking up experience or whatever you want. So I remember being a little intimidated by going out into that last year of high school, like, oh, finally single again, You get used to that companionship. It's so addictive. I've always found just having somebody in your corner, it feels great. And
totally.
Maybe that's partially a self-esteem issue. I wouldn't call myself the most independently capable. I feel like I do kind of fall apart without other humans to, resonate with. It really does benefit me a lot. I don't know if that's empathy or what, but
yeah, we're social beings from cradle to grave. We're social beings. Think about what happened during the pandemic. People trying to come together, people clapping at frontline workers, and we're there was that joke about capitalism, right? This notion of individualism. It said, if capitalism is so great, why does it need socialism to bail it out every 10 to 20 years? Like the pandemic hits, and what happened? Government step in, funding businesses. I mean, we need this infrastructure. And I'll say one thing about Sweden is that they do they do a very good job supporting people with illness. If your child is sick here and you have to stay home to take care of them, the government pays your salary.
Wow.
For over 200 days in a year if there's a serious illness.
That's amazing.
That's not even counting your own sick days, which you're entitled to. But if your children are sick here, and we found this out when we first moved here, and my son was sick, and they called my wife into HR. They're like, sign this. They even wrote to her. She had a seminar to give at the university, and the director wrote to her and said, we've moved your seminar 2 weeks ahead. You shouldn't have to be working on it while you're at home taking care of your son. And so when I was watching some of the stuff from Ontario, when they got rid of the 2 paid sick days, like my heart was breaking.
Yeah.
Because as you pointed out, I mean, we need each other. And when I was a manager in Toronto and I had to check my staff, and they lying about their sick days to be with their kids at home. I mean, it was just so stressful. And so that's one thing. No, they do very well here, is that people are not afraid they're going to lose their jobs or lose their income if children are sick. And I think it's a lovely thing. I think that helps society be less anxious.
That's along the same lines as the universal basic income that they were sort of toying with the idea here in Canada. I know other countries have done it already, and it seems like not the worst idea, just giving people a sure footing so that they don't have to invest so much time and energy into panicking about not being able to pay their next bill. And I don't know, I think it would benefit in a lot of ways. I'm sure there'd be a couple people taking advantage of the system, but it's, it was only $1,000 a month or something. It's not an insane amount of cash. It's just enough that you can kind of coast a little bit on the stress levels and focus your energy into something a little more productive or artistic, or, I'm in support of it personally.
Well, I think what it makes me think of is in line with what you and I are talking about, which is that if we are social beings, if we get sick when we are in isolation, or we don't know how to put food on our table, that if that is actually taken seriously, then the cost to society, the cost to hospitals, the cost to mental health for people that feel isolated, and that's a definition of trauma. This is Diana Fosha in New York. She says, trauma is overwhelming emotion from a place of aloneness. And so, to your point, if there's just this idea, if we just lay our egos down and say, look, we're going to basically try to support people, then you might have just less wear and tear on healthcare, because people aren't walking around, as you're pointing out, sick from worry about how they're going to survive, and that has its own costs that I think we're constantly trying to deal with and understand.
Yeah, and of course, the pandemic only added to that, of being actually physically worried about getting sick on top of all the other things you worry about on a normal day-to-day basis. Yeah, I'm really hoping, it's going to wrap up soon, much like everybody else. Seems like we're getting there, but it's arduous and feels sometimes just like eternity,
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you along those lines, what do you think about, I heard recently that a lot of dating apps now, people are starting to display vaxxed badges, partial or fully vaxxed, sort of as a way to let potential mates know where they stand. But do you think this is something that like a beneficial development, or do you think it's just another opportunity to be dishonest on those types of apps?
That's a good question. I certainly chuckled a little bit the way that vaccinations became, whether it's on Facebook or on social media, and I get it, right? I mean, it's a nice thing to share with friends and family, and kind of to, as a sign that we're getting out of this. If it's a question of dishonesty, for me, that's just another, I imagine there are myriad ways that one can create a persona online. And this is just one more thing that, if someone is fundamentally lying about something, well, then that's a much deeper issue than.
Yeah, I suppose, same person may also have an STD,
Yeah, sure. Right. There's many things. But look, right? I mean, if it helps people feel safe, if that's a priority for somebody, great. People will find each other, and I think if anything, something as divisive as the pandemic, as vaccinations, it just, and that's another thing to talk about couples, right? That was also very difficult. People that had a higher comfort level with risk, and people that are more risk averse, like my wife. Was really careful here in Sweden. She was wearing a mask from the beginning. She was literally, and I'm not exaggerating, if she was 1 in 10, 20,000 people wearing a mask.
Oh, wow.
She would go out and maybe in the beginning not see anybody else for a whole day in a mask. And it was tough to do. But even in our relationship, and I was telling a friend this morning, I had to learn, I'm more pushing the envelope. I'm getting out there. And I had to really reflect and change and accept our differences in that regard. And I think I came to that, and I've told her many times. And so, I think if we're talking about dating apps and people writing that they're vaccinated and stuff, I mean, that's going to attract a certain person that is maybe looking for that kind of transparency and that kind of cue, and then of course they're going to have to do their homework and meet them and
there's just follow through, of course.
Just figure out if they think the person's an honest, if they have integrity or not. I mean, I guess that's never going to change when it comes to
fundamental
dating and or not, right? Some may, because there's the whole public, private, privacy issues. And I heard in the States, did you hear this, that businesses can be fined in certain states if they actually ask a patron for proof of if they're vaccinated.
Oh, really?
In the thousands of dollars, and so that's very, it's very divisive. I mean, it's,
I was going to say, you touched on that, but it seems like the latest in a long string of things, because obviously there was Trump and there's always the red and the blue and all that. But the vaccines in particular seem to really, really, beyond just romantic relationships, friendships have been ending over this. People are just split down the middle. So what do you think we should do as a society to mitigate that and to try to bridge that gap and maybe get back to a place where we can be discussing things again and not instantly saying, oh, you're on the other side, I want nothing to do with you, because that seems to be what's trending now.
Yeah. People are always talking about mental health, right? But one of the questions is, what is good mental health, right? What are we talking about, right? I mean, we know the basic stuff. We know, for instance, someone can talk about having high anxiety or being depressed, but what do we really mean? And one of the things that actually indicates good mental health is actually being able to hold the tension of an argument, right? So good mental health is, I can hear you have a strong opinion, but it doesn't trigger me in a way where I feel threatened or I feel like I have to somehow stand on my soapbox and get tense and fight and so I don't know. I'm not so optimistic, to be honest, that questions around vaccination, politics, these are always going to create a certain divisiveness because group psychology is very seductive. It feels very good to kind of
echo chambers.
Subsume yourself in, Rick Salutin, Canadian journalist at the beginning, actually of Trump. He wrote a piece and he was taking aim at both sides, and he was saying, we're just puny human beings at the end of the day. And so people are going to just really get into a group and fight to the death. And so to answer your question on a very personal level, I think the way to have conversations is just to recognize in ourselves if we're having a hard time, hearing somebody else's opinion, if we find our back going up, if you find yourself going into ones and zeros, like all bad, all good, if you hear yourself ever making statements like that, I mean, you're certainly in a stress response, and there's a direct connection between trauma and paranoia, and so very, very traumatized people, very often will become conspiracy theorists, and because it
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because it's nice to have a kind of aesthetically perfect, pleasing narrative to comfort yourself in with no anxiety. And if someone comes along and tries to shift it, that means now you have to experience anxiety until you're like, nope, doesn't matter whether, Biden won. It's like, nope, I can't believe it, because then I'll have to be anxious. And so I think one way is to realize that anxiety is good. You should feel anxious sometimes if you're having a debate or if you're meeting somebody who's different that challenges you. We can't be afraid of being anxious. And so on a personal level, I think, just try and listen and realize if your back is going up and go for a walk.
Yeah. Cool your jets. And what you were saying about conspiracy theorists, I've had a friendship or two sort of go awry because of stuff like that. And I'm not someone who's closed-minded. I've seen many conspiracies eventually be proved true. Like, I'm open to that. I think we should question things. But I've had a couple friends go off the deep end with, flat earth and anything. You throw anything at them, that's it, because it goes against the mainstream narrative, and that's seductive, like you said, to them. Maybe it's cool, but I think a lot of the time it's sort of a fabrication or like a fairy tale that they can be a part of, because it's a way of reassuring them. Sorry, I should preface again by saying that all the people I know that are like this are people who do not have their shit together. They're not exercising. They don't have a good job. They don't have strong relationships. And I think this helps them imbue themselves with this narrative of, it's not me that's the problem. It's the world. And now I have the real knowledge and everyone else just doesn't get it,
Yes. Yeah, it's better. It's better. This is a bit of psychoanalytic language, but it's better to have an object than no object, meaning, it's better to have a vision for something that maybe inspires you and seems clear, and maybe there's a guru there that you can follow, than it is to feel lost and alone. That's almost easier than being sad and realizing maybe there is no quote unquote truth, that it's complicated. And so I agree with you. I think it makes sense. And I have some friends here whose parents are way off the deep end in the US with, the QAnon, and it's sad to hear them talk about calling home, and really there's no way to relate because it's so drastic. I think it's a symptom of pain for sure.
I've seen this happening with other people too, parents or just different relationships, and they try to talk about these issues. They reach an impasse, and then they start to tiptoe around it, not talk about it, but then it becomes this festering thing that, like the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about because they know it's instantly going to just erupt into tension and drama, which is so unfortunate because, like you said, it's happening to families and couples. And I don't know. I just wish people could get to a point where we could, really just talk things out a little bit more. We're never always going to agree on everything, but we could try to get back to the roots of what make us human and the things that really connect us, you know? The same reason I've never understood homophobia, racism, all that, because in my mind, I'm always like, we're all just trying to do our best here. We're all just born into these weird skin suits and, we're just trying to survive.
I admire people that really speak up, I admire people that go into the fray. All the stuff happening in Canada recently with, the graves of these Indigenous children and this horrible incident in London and
yes.
My friends that are really keyed in and putting these issues out there and speaking so eloquently about them. I have so much respect for them, because like you just said, I find with myself, if I know a discussion is just going to become binary ones and zeros, I'll tend to park it because I'm like, there's no point in going around and around and just seeing, so again, that may be something that I need to grow into, but people that really put themselves out there and advocate, I think it's a pretty amazing trait and it's important and it takes courage because it's not easy to stand up and have these, really difficult discussions. That's
standing up for anything is admirable, and a lot of times it's extremely difficult. This is a bit of a weird story, but I don't know. I think I'm going to tell it. Something happened to me yesterday that put me in a very awkward situation where I had to confront a very awkward situation, but I felt I did the right thing. I was walking my dogs. This was just before noon, and there's a little ravine near our house with a bridge that goes over it, and sort of a forested area, but a stone throw away, I'm talking 20 yards or whatever it is, there's a school and there's a playground, and this forest connecting area kind of just goes between them. I'm walking my dogs through and quickly realize there's a woman giving oral sex to a dude on a log. Broad daylight, right up there. So my first reaction was turn around, obviously, because I didn't want to be a perv. And also I was kind of just taken aback. Like, is this really happening right now? It's like lunchtime and there's a school and a playground. Like this is sex offender stuff here. But I actually forced myself to turn around and walk by. Obviously I was trying to avert my eyes, but I said, hey, I walk my kids through here, get a effing room, whatever, normally I swear on this, but if for some reason I don't want to swear to you.
It's funny. I wanted to swear earlier, but I wasn't sure.
You can swear. I said shit. Yeah.
Good.
Well then, yes, here's my verbatim. I said, get a fucking room. And I found myself all day thinking of all these things I wish I would have said, because I don't think I really said enough, because for all I know, they may have just gone right back to it after I left. And the next people who may have come up might have been some kid who's now going to be traumatized and confused by this brazen act just so they can get their jollies with a kick of adrenaline or whatever. It just felt so selfish and so disrespectful.
You should have said, go to fucking Sweden.
They don't frown upon that there.
Well, there's just a long history here of a certain comfort level with, but
Well, to me, it was not, I was not offended by a couple or
no, of course not.
It was more the location, the geographical location to me was like, there's kids around here. And if you know this neighborhood at all, and the one woman I've seen her walking around, so I know she does. There's children around here, and that's where I kind of drew the line. I'm like, you want to do something kinky in a movie theater in the dark? Okay, that's a little
get behind the log, not on the log. Like,
the
use
dude
the
was
log,
sitting on the log,
use it as a prop or something. I mean, at least just.
Well, the weirdest part was when I sort of walked up, and again, I wasn't really looking, but I could tell that they weren't really adjusting or like pulling their stuff together. It felt more like they were waiting for me to leave and just kind of accepting their temporary shame before they could resume their activities. I don't know.
So I had a different experience, but so Stockholm, the Stockholm Central is one of those beautiful cities I've ever been in my life. I mean, it's so pretty. It is a bubble though. It's very homogeneous, kind of in the center. When you get into the suburbs of Stockholm, you find very dense immigrant communities. And that was tricky when COVID started to get the word out and get information to people. But we went to Oslo, and there was the opposite, that they tried to break up certain neighborhoods that were, had high crime and drug use. And so it pushed everything into the center. And so we went to Oslo. We stayed right by the train station. I went for a walk into this park with my son and my wife. And there was like a really beautiful statue. And I walk up and I see this woman literally injecting, like putting a needle into her arm. And I just my arm just went out to my son. I did a like, oh, let's go over this way. Like, I don't think he ever saw it, but it was just this, like you said, right? I mean, it's, we gotta,
I mean, in that instance, I would have a little more compassion because she might have been out of her mind already. There's less judgment. Not that that's really an excuse, but compared to this couple, I mean, I suppose they could have been out of their mind, but they looked more just like a couple that were trying to spice up their marriage or whatever. And anyway, I can't believe I told that story. It just happened to me yesterday. I still can't really believe it. It was so weird.
Unless I see pictures, it didn't happen.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to pull out my phone in that moment. No thanks. I mean, I guess I could have to take it to the cops or something, but anyway. I want to know just one last question about COVID and all this stuff we've been going through is, do you think there are any lasting effects that are going to be really, really common post-pandemic once this is really over? And especially do you think the youth are going to be severely impacted by, during their developmental stages? Pick an age. I'm sure it's going to impact them, but like, how do you think this is going to, resonate in the future?
It's a good question. And I literally was saying this to someone earlier today. And I mean, look, we've been through a lot, the human race. I was saying to someone, how much did you think about the Spanish flu growing up? Maybe you knew about it. Maybe you did a project on it at school. Maybe, I don't know, you work in that field. But the vast majority of people, it's just a faint little memory in their mind. Yeah. First and Second World War, Cold War, never mind people that are coming from places where there were civil wars or proxy wars. I mean, I don't want to underplay, of course, the effects that the pandemic had on us. But I really believe if you look at history, we move on and people are going to be very excited to get back to normal and do things. And when it comes to duress, when it comes to things that stress us out, to be honest, trauma is not the event itself. So there's a great piece of evidence actually that comes out of 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, that actually there were more cases of PTSD after Hurricane Katrina than after 9/11. This is the work of a man named Bessel van der Kolk in Boston. He's a psychiatrist, and the reason that he gives for this is that our ability, again, to be social, meaning to get away from something, to run to a friend's place, to get out of danger, that is what protects us. So 9/11, if you look at the images, people are running over the Brooklyn Bridge, they're getting away. Don't get me wrong, many people were stuck and lost loved ones, and that's maybe where you see cases of trauma. But those that were maybe in a state of shock, but were able to actually move and go to safety, that's what inoculates us from lasting effects of events. A flood like Katrina, you're confined. You can't go anywhere. And even if you are rescued, very often it's even more confining, right? And so the feeling of not being able to go to somebody, to not have support, that's actually what ends up causing us trauma, because we can't we can't fulfill the sort of the mammal's kind of like instinct to get away and save itself, right? That's why soldiers, some get traumatized, some don't, but those that do often find themselves in extremely helpless situations. And so I don't know that there's a blanket answer for how it affects people or ages. I think that probably if someone lost their business, if a child loved school and their friends and being home was really hard for them, but the child had nobody, or if the child was being blamed, for instance, right? If a child was crying a lot and maybe in the family, the parents just couldn't find language for it, or, we're saying, why can't you just deal with this? Like that's the traumatic part, right? The traumatic part is actually not the pandemic. The traumatic part is if the stress that people experienced was then treated in a very negative way by those around them, pathologized, or God forbid, physically abused, or which people worried about, right? They worried kids not going to school if family situations weren't great. I think early on there was a lot of people advocating like keep the kids in school, because what if the situation at home is really bad?
Yeah, that's some kids' safe zone for sure.
So I think that's where we have to focus, not so much that not everybody who has a glass of wine gets addicted. Not everyone that eats food overeats. It's not the thing itself. It's the environment and comfort that we have around us that protects us from getting traumatized. And so if anything, if people are listening and this is resonating, or if it feels like what you went through, if you were alone with it, and then you're noticing certain symptoms like chronic fatigue, or you're crying all the time, that might be not a symptom of the pandemic per se, but maybe something getting a bit arrested in the way that it's being expressed and dealt with on a communal level.
Wow.
So that I think you could totally see.
Yeah, that's super interesting way to look at that. Thank you for that. That was a great answer. I want to, before I forget, get more into your podcast, because you launched this just in May. So this is very, very new. But like I mentioned, I listened to the preliminary introduction episode, and it was super great. You have great stories about both your grandparents that I think are very moving, very touching. And your dad talking about his brother too. Like the whole thing was really sucked me in. But beyond that, the tempo and the cadence of your voice is extremely calming. That's one thing I noticed as well. You're very paced in your speaking, unlike myself. I kind of mile a minute.
I question that, but I like just the focus. So thank you.
It was calming. It was a nice slow down to, like, it was the end of my day. I listened to it and it was just a really nice, I was cooking my dinner, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, man. So cool. With that in mind, I don't want to spoil those stories about your grandparents, because I really think people should go listen to them. They're fantastic. But I want to know, when did you for sure realize that you absolutely wanted to spend your life trying to help people? Was there like a moment where everything kind of came together? There
was a moment. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I literally just told the person, literally like last week, the day before I was interviewing Gabor Mate, it was very meaningful for me. And I wrote a post on Facebook kind of just opening up and being like, hey, like this is really a moment for me. And I wrote to this woman, her name is Carolyn Holdsworth, who was a friend in high school. And we were sitting on the steps in high school. I went to a theater school, in high school. And so there were these steps that went out of the theater school outside, and we were just talking. And I don't even remember if it was like a boyfriend thing, or like all I can see in my mind is that she was a bit sad. She was confiding in me. And I remember just sitting there being like, oh, I like this. I'm like, I could do this for a living. I'm like, I want to be a therapist. It was just kind of subtle and sweet in my mind. It was just a feeling of listening and connecting. And that, I mean, there are other moments that push things forward or further refine kind of like theoretically what I wanted to do. But the human connection piece is big for me, and I don't think we should get caught up in all the theoretical stuff. Like the relationship part of therapy, going back even to Aristotle, is a very powerful component of healing. And so I think for me, that's when it started.
That's super great. Oh man, that's cool. It's like your origin story. But I just told her last week. I just, like, on Facebook, I was like, and she wrote to me and she's like, oh my God, it made me smile from ear to ear. And we're going to talk. Like, we've been emailing and we haven't spoken in, oh my God, 20 years. That's so cool. Yeah, I can see the smile on your face just talking about it now. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've already had some really great guests on, really intellectual people. And I wanted to know if there's anyone that you're dying to interview.
That's a good question. I mean, there's an American psychologist named Donald Kalshed, who's just moved literally across, like, from the west to the East Coast. And so he wrote to me and said that, look, this summer is like a big, he's in his 70s and they're moving. And he wrote a couple of books. One's called The Inner World of Trauma. One's called Trauma and the Soul. Just a really compassionate, intelligent, writer, therapist that I think about a lot when I'm working. I reference him a lot, and it'd be nice to have a longer chat with him, because when I have encountered him at conferences and stuff, it's busy and you can't really get into stuff. So that's somebody. But Gabor Mate for me was, I mean, literally, it was like my A-list, and I said to myself, like, just try, and wrote to him, and he graciously wrote back and said yes. And I was like, really? great.
I was going to say, I know that feeling all too well. I've only been doing this show for like a year and a half, and I've already talked to so many people I never thought. Like, I had Tommy Chong on the other week, and
Oh, sweet. Well, that's
George
encouraging.
Stroumboulopoulos and Spenny and all these people that I loved watching on TV as a kid. So I totally know what you mean. You just got to put yourself out there and not be afraid to be a little embarrassed or fail or any of that.
Totally. Yeah. I like that. I think it's changed me in very positive ways to do this and put myself out there. And I've noticed that it's a good thing, I think, to continually just challenge yourself. And
definitely, yeah, keep trying new things. Other therapy questions I had for you. I wanted to know, I heard that I read rather, that you were very interested in imagination and dreams. So I want to know what you think we can learn from our dreams.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's changed for me over time. One of the things that I think has stayed with me when working with dreams or thinking about our imagination is that at the end of the day, we're just people, right? Like I'm just, somebody comes to see me and I can't, yes, I've trained. Yes, I read all this stuff. Yes, I think about it. Yes, I love it. But I'm just another person with my own faults and trying to do my own work. And, dreams are often thought of as a kind of like a mediating document, meaning, when we're sleeping at night, parts of the brain are shut down. A lot of the executive functioning is shut down, and our something within us is producing. I tell this story on my, I think it's my second episode, where when I first did my dream work, the woman I was working with, the Women's Television Network reached out to her and said, "Look, we're doing an episode on alternative therapies. Do you have anybody?" And so they produced my dreams. So they took two of my dreams and they filmed them. They rented a bus, they rented a bank, they had an alarm going off.
Whoa.
Like this was like, it was on television, one of my dreams, and so crazy, right? Like such a kooky thing to have happened to you. And that woman, Charlene, when I interviewed her and I loved what she said, she goes, she doesn't understand, like, she's a smart woman, but she's like, I'm not even going to touch where dreams come from. Like, it's such a mystery to her. But there's something about them. There's a kind of wisdom there, and it's coming from a place in us when we're not in control. There's a lot of research right now that's being done on like microdosing, and there's, the FDA in the United States is doing a ton of research using MDMA with hard to treat soldiers. And I've seen the research and I've seen the videotapes. And for me, the connection to what they're discovering is actually that what we have to do, even performing, right? Going to a concert and that feeling when, that song that you just love or you put on and it just transports you like somewhere else, I think there's something very healthy about connecting with these parts of us that transcend our conscious mind, our conscious intentions, the things that we think we want and need. The way that art can change your mood in a heartbeat. You can be like, you can be kind of lost and just like, life can suck. And like a song comes on and you're like, there's that feeling. In the car.
Yeah,
totally. And I just think there's something very powerful that connects us to ourselves when we turn inward like that. I mean, that comes definitely from Carl Jung, but when we turn inward and we consider very seriously these images that are coming from whatever you want to call it, our unconscious, these very sophisticated, our memory, right? How can we dream of friends from 20 years ago as if they're like right there, like someone you haven't seen or thought about. And then you wake up and you're like, man, someone you otherwise pretty much forgot about. Yeah. Yeah. How does our brain hold the visceral, like,
it's insane,
it's insane. Right. Yeah. And so I really love it in therapy. I mean, I also work, a lot with neurobiology of emotion and that, but when there's a dream, like I saw someone today, and there's a dream she had about 3 months ago, and what's happening in her life right now, we just talked about the dream, and it was it just all came together. It was like one of my teachers says, a dream is always a bit ahead of you. It's you're trying to catch up to your dreams, right? Because there's that expression, and I speak Yiddish. It's metracht and Gott lacht, which means like one thinks and God laughs, or like one plans and God laughs. Like we plan things in our lives, but things tend to rock us the other way. And I think dreams are a part of that. They're kind of pushing up against our best laid plans, and they're hints. They're little hints at what we need to look at within ourselves, and so we ignore them to some extent at our peril. I think that's.
Well, I'm kind of torn on dreams, because I feel like there's been times where I have a dream that's very distinct, and I Google it, and sure enough, the descriptor that they give is very apt for what I'm going through, or it's very representative and it makes sense. But then there's other dreams that are just bananas nonsense that I wouldn't even bother typing into Google, because I can't even put them together, So like they say, if you dream about your teeth falling out, that you're worried about financial stuff. I've heard that, amongst other. Apparently, if you dream about flying, it means you're horny. These are, I don't know if this is accurate, but these are ones I've heard.
Well, I think, we have to resist, I think, a kind of reductive, serious dream work in a therapeutic context, needs to be careful and considered. We want quick answers. We want kind of fortune cookie stuff, but
yeah.
But when dreams are taken up in therapy or in, it's there's something about holding the image, whether it's teeth, whether it's flying, and really allowing it to connect to a person's specific life. And so I'm not bemoaning, there's lots of literature or websites or people that go into the history of symbols and things like this. And there's actually an institute in New York, and all they do is study symbols. It's called Eris, and I've been there, and it's just, they just look at the history of images of planes or of teeth or of mothers, or, and they collect these things as a way of, connecting us to our imagination in the past. And so, I'm sure I've looked stuff up at times, but the art of working with dreams in therapy is a bit more considered in terms of holding what we don't know and waiting until we maybe have a sense of what it means. But one more thing I'll say, and Carl Jung said this, he said, dreams are like apples on a tree, right? Some apples fall and, degrade in the ground, never get eaten, just disappear. Some apples are ripe and we take it off and we, taste its juice, and, and I think life is like that, right? We can't be too precious about it. Some things may never make sense. Well,
another thing that is very interesting about dreaming to me is lucid dreaming. I've always thought is very, very cool. And I've even heard that there's certain herbs or I can't remember if it was an herb or something from Africa, I believe, that you can take before bed that will sort of induce lucid dreaming. And other tricks, like if you look for a clock, someone told me that if you try to find numbers in your dream, you won't be able to read language, and then you'll become aware of the fact that you're in a dream, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's neat. I think it all boils down to this curiosity, right? That people intentionally, whether it's lucid dreaming or, I think there's a lot of power in people experimenting with ways of getting closer to themselves.
Yeah, well, dreams are certainly fascinating. And you kind of touched on this, but I wanted to know what you think about people exploring psychedelics for therapy, such as LSD, psilocybin, and like you mentioned, MDMA. Are you in support of that? Or do you think that that's the right way that we should be advancing towards?
Life is hard. Many types of traumas, especially traumas from war, sexual abuse, it can really make life difficult. And, I think a few years ago, there was a vet in the East Coast of Canada that woke up in the middle of the night, and I think he shot his family. And, the news reports were talking about like, why didn't they know this was going to happen? Or he had a psychiatrist. And I remember shaking my head and saying, look, we're human beings. I've worked in the hospital. I've worked in the emergency room. These are just attempts at good enough understanding. And some kinds of traumas break us. And if you look at the history of literature, at psychiatry, pain runs deep, and we're very fragile. And so this is a way of answering your question, which is, if the use of psychedelics, of MDMA, if it helps bypass the ways that we protect ourselves from pain, which cause us to break and explode and hurt other people, I'm up for anything. I mean, whatever helps people feel safer. The danger, and I think Gabor Mate and I touched on this a little bit together, is that there's no panacea. And so I have met people, when it comes to things like ayahuasca, I don't know if you've heard of that,
yes,
but
yes, of course. Yeah.
Then you can meet people and like, oh, I've done ayahuasca 20 times, or then it becomes like another wild goose chase for salvation. And there, I think, and that can be ayahuasca, that can be food, that can be therapy. If we resist the disappointment of life, if these things become anti-life,
yeah,
as in the psychedelic, the psychedelic experience is, hung on to as a kind of ideal way of experiencing life.
Yeah,
I could see a danger there. But what I saw in the footage that those that are working on it, it seems to help transcend the vicious ways that we turn on ourselves when we feel helpless, and to access a kind of self-healing, part of the human being that is very important.
Yeah,
and I think that
a lot of your ego.
Yeah, there are many ways to get there. And if they find that this adds to our repertoire, the last thing I'll say is people often talk about, medication for mental illness is the very divisive topic. I'll tell you something. If you actually study the history of psychosis, of schizophrenia, we have come a long way. And I worked with patients, that had schizophrenia and bipolar and were on injection medicine. And they were better off than people in history who were either in chains, locked up and kept away from society.
Yeah,
pariahs.
They can have some semblance of a normal life now.
Yeah, or community, and again, there's no panacea, but it's a roundabout way of answering a question about what people are trying. That we need all these tools in our toolbox because it's hard. It's hard to help people trust again.
And how are we going to know if something is really helpful to us if we can't even experiment with it and, do these trials, and everything that so far has been coming out seems very positive. So it seems like this should have been potentially done a long time ago. So I'm very hopeful to see where it goes in the following decades. If things keep, people keep challenging the older way of thinking in that regard, which is funny in a way, because the really, really older way of thinking is using all these things. If we're talking thousands of years, cultures have been using, whether it's ayahuasca or mushrooms or whatever. So it's odd and interesting that in the last some more modern era of humanity, we kind of made them these bad things and became, you're going to go to jail forever if you're caught with this. And, it just seems to contraband status, everything seems a strange decision, but it's probably a control factor.
I think the ways that we attempt to heal are cultural. It used to be very religious, up until the late 19th century, it really started to change. Things like exorcisms, going to confession, for instance, right? That was therapeutic, right? You go like therapy, you close the door, someone's listening to you, it's private, So I think you're right. I think the cultural shifts allow for more, but look, we'll never, as long as human beings are on this planet, we're going to have to find ways to deal with existing with pain, and no tool, no arsenal in psychology is ever going to get rid of just these huge questions. And that's really goes back to my podcast, right? That really is at the heart of it, which is, can we, at least in the background, maintain a sense of dignity around suffering I always go back to the French. I love like the French ballads where they, I don't know if you ever listen to like Jacques Brel or like Charles Aznavour. But if you ever listen to the French music, they're like 12 stanzas, and it's very often it's like folk music. They're just stories, right? It's just like stories about hardship and disappointment, and and there's this great song by Jacques Brel called "La Chanson des Vieux Amants," the song of the old lovers. And it's like 12 verses of like all the shit they've been through. And at the end of it, basically he's like, oh, well, we're still next to each other breathing.
That's the one.
And I just love how it just normalizes our experience, and it makes us a bit less freaked out if shit goes wrong. If, I feel it too when I'm having a bad day, or even today, to be honest. I was up at 5 a.m. The sun was up here early. I was working, and by 9 o'clock, I was tired. I'm like, why am I getting all loopy? And it's like, oh yeah, of course, you've been up for like ever.
Yeah.
Just calm down. It's, you can't always be on. And so I think that's what I'm aiming for a bit in the podcast, which is just to look at all different ways that we try to honor our experience and not get defensive or reactive around it, which I think in modern psychology, we have a little bit, where people are freaked out if they get anxious, and I don't mean to malign people that are dealing with serious anxiety disorders, but I am also pushing the boundaries a little bit. And I'm saying we need to just accept a degree of pain and anxiety and experience so that we can let it in.
Yeah.
And not kind of drink the Kool-Aid.
It loses its power that way, which can be very helpful. I do suffer from anxiety, and I have obsessive compulsive disorder as well. And, I started reading a book a few months back when I was having a bit of a pandemic, moment. And it was a lot of that, just actualizing that in your mind. Okay, I have anxiety. This is just an anxiety attack, and not letting yourself get overwhelmed and caught up with the whole thing, And that was very helpful to me. And it's funny because it's so simple, but to have it written on a page in front of me and sort of given to me like an instruction, it really seemed to make a big difference,
Yeah, totally. And I think some of this stuff makes us who we are.
Yeah.
I think so, but I don't want to minimize, certainly I have my own stuff that I ruminate on and try and fix. But I do try to come back as much as I can and say, hey, like the more we can embrace about our subjectivity, the more we can embrace with the things that we maybe obsess over, or a lot of that stuff is how we got here. A lot of the ways that, people that are maybe more A-type and, feel like, oh, they can't slow down. It's like, well, there's probably a reason that you're that way. Probably, maybe it helped your career. Maybe you need to get out of your home, or, and sure, there's stuff we have to look at and work on, but we cannot demonize our superpowers, the things that like kept us alive, and I think that, I think we're quick to kind of be like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I, and it's like, well, wait, like, hold on. I'm sure there's a reason. I'm sure this got you somewhere for some reason. And that's Cowshed's work. First, let's look at, what did this do for you? Why did you go into the world ablazing like this? And there's got to be a reason that you came out of your home with these very specific ways of dealing with the world. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then if you want to start to tweak things, all the power to you, but don't throw yourself under the bus. And don't be so quick to judge these things that kept you alive, because they'll just come back and be like, buddy, I'm your best friend. Yeah. You're not kicking me out. If you turn on me, I'm coming back with a vengeance. Like your best friend. It's like, why aren't you answering my call? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?
It's true though. It can be a survival tactic, stuff like anxiety. It really does.
Absolutely.
Help you, kind of steer clear of certain situations that might not be healthy for you. And yeah, that's a much more positive way of approaching it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's actually necessary. And I've had people tell me that they finally feel that they're not they're not all wrong, that if we can just, and I try and do it with myself, there's reasons I'm gregarious or talking to you or doing the podcast. There are reasons I had to kind of, cultivate a bit of a more open personality and focus on these things. It's, what do they say? All research is me search.
That's interesting. I've never heard that. I like that though. Oh man. God, there's so much stuff to talk to you about. Like, maybe I'll just ask you this later, but I started reading about Carl Jung because I had never heard of him. And when I saw in your credentials that you were, wait, I don't want to screw this up. Oh, now I can't find it, but it was part of your title was Jungian
Yeah. I'm a Jungian
psychoanalyst.
psychoanalyst.
There
sure.
we go. So it caused me to, do a bit of a little preliminary research into Carl Jung, and it sounded very interesting. He was like buddies with Freud, and then they had a bit of a separation where they kind of never talked again. And so I'm really, really eager to keep reading into that because it sounded like a really cool school of thought.
Yeah, David Cronenberg, not that the movie is very, let's say, accurate to what happened, but there's a movie called A Dangerous Method,
Oh, cool.
which chronicles Freud and Jung's life. And there was a lot of criticism about the sources that he used and him embellishing them. But look, it's art. So know it's art, but enjoy the film. And it, they were the greats. They were the ones that started what we know today as modern day psychotherapy. Really, I mean, Freud, the shift was, it's a very clear shift. The shift was that just before Freud and Bloyer, started, they had just discovered that people could be manipulated if they had serious, severe physical illness, like paralysis.
Huh.
So this is Charcot working in France, right? Someone can't move the left side of their body, okay?
Okay.
And up until that point, they would think something organically is wrong with you, right? Something's wrong with your brain, something's wrong with your nervous system.
Yeah.
What they discovered, though, is under hypnosis, if you say to someone, when you wake up, the right side of your body is going to be paralyzed. The person would come out of hypnosis and now the right side of their body is paralyzed, but they're walking with the left side of their body.
Whoa, what?
And that's
crazy.
Right. It's crazy. But that's where the word transference came from, that you could transfer illness. And so anyway, they just discovered basically that physical symptom can be caused by severe emotional distress, and it's suggestive. So you can actually change through suggestion. And Jung, we could get into it if you want, but Jung was part of that history in a way. But he worked more with psychotics in the beginning, where Freud was working more with people that we would call sort of neurotically oriented, what they called back then. Yeah,
Freud was very much fixated on the sexual nature of things as well, right? And that was something, from what I read, Jung kind of deviated from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were discovering that sexual trauma, first of all, was whether real or imagined, was a cause of a lot of hysteria, a lot of mental illness back then. But then Freud really developed a theory about how our sexual drives, our wish fulfillment, and the power of that, and really in many ways what he was talking about was how we have to become civilized, right? So we have to dampen these instincts and these drives in us and go outside. Remember, he was in Vienna and Austria, right? So, kind of, we might argue a kind of almost Victorian repressed kind of, so he was arguing these drives are always pushing up against, consciousness and civility. And Jung broadened Freud's sexual theory to talk about energy, libido more broadly, and it's actually very different in many ways what he was, his project around that.
Yeah, I'm not expecting you to paraphrase like both of these men's work right now, but it's very, very interesting stuff. I was getting sucked in, just starting to do a bit of the basic research. So
yeah, these were the pioneers for sure.
I do want to shift now, though, because you're also an actor and a musician, because you're amazing, apparently, and you do a million things. But you've done stuff on Broadway, and you performed with Jerry Stiller and Mandy Patinkin and people from Sesame Street, I read, which was, I need to know which puppets, because that's killing me here not knowing.
So it was, who was there? There was the Cookie Monster and
that's so cool.
And oh my God, the blue one. Grover.
Yes, he's my favorite.
I remember seeing I wanted to steal it. Did I take it after the show was done? It was like Grover's dressing room.
Oh, crazy.
And I was like, I think when the show was done, I like took the sign from it was like a printed page. But I'm like, I need this for my house to have Grover's dressing room sign. So I was involved. A big part of my career was actually performing in Yiddish.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah. So I it was the language of my my ancestors in Europe, and and it had a huge influence on the theater scene in New York and America. And it really gave me an opportunity to travel, to tour, and really come back to sort of the roots of my family. And as a result of that, I worked for a theater in New York City, and then they would do these huge benefits and bring in just, people like Mandy Patinkin. And they did a tribute to Jerry Stiller. He was injured at the time, actually, so he had to be what's it called on video link
via satellite.
But we were at Town Hall on Broadway, and and that was certainly a lot of fun.
So were you always pursuing these artistic things in tandem with doing therapeutic stuff, or did you take a break and sort of switch back and forth?
It's a great question. So one of the psychoanalysis, to train as a psychoanalyst, even now, they want you to wait until you're older. So you couldn't apply actually in Ontario until you were 35. And then when I was, in my 20s, they changed it to being 30 years old. And the idea was that psychotherapy, or being a therapist, you don't want to over-identify with it, meaning you don't want to adopt this kind of persona of like, I'm the healer, I'm going to help you, I know something you don't. What they want is the person to pursue their dreams and to really like wrestle with their own creative impulses, so that I think when you come to the profession, you've been through the ringer yourself. It's not hypothetical. You're not in your early 20s. Someone comes into your office and they have whatever huge existential anxiety about their career. And somehow you're like, oh yes, that's very hard. Here, let's do this exercise. There was this idea that you go through it, and so that was the thing. I went to an arts high school. I studied theater at the University of Toronto, and I hit the pavement and auditioned a ton. Did a bunch of stuff that I loved. And was lucky in some ways, because early on, through 3 performances that I did, actually one of them was the one time I sang with an orchestra, was the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, when Mel Lastman was the mayor of Toronto. And actually I sang for Donald Trump. Weird. I sang, when he opened Trump Tower long before he was president, etc. There was this crazy evening where it turns out that Mel Lastman had been calling him like all the time, come to Toronto, come to the ball. And so there I was, like singing with Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and like Trump shows up late. He comes in, and I remember his speech to this day. Like he got up and he went to the microphone and he was like, yeah, I'm here. Mel Lastman called me 30 times. Finally, his wife called me, so I said yes. Nice to meet you, Toronto. And like he got off the stage, and like I know it was just gross even back then. Yeah. But that's just a way of saying that, I had these kind of cool gigs. That night in the audience was a man who became a very good friend of mine named David Bookbinder, who was a fantastic musician, trumpet player, but who was a kind of impresario producer and produced this huge festival in Toronto. He took me under his wing. I took over his job as artistic director when I was 24. Wow. And so I was a working artist, but also I had this artistic directorship of this festival, which allowed me, some financial security early on to explore my art. And I put out an album in 2008. I ended up producing at Harborfront Center for another 4 or 5 years. So I did broad stuff, classical music. I dealt with like food, so like bringing like farm to table stuff, bringing farmers down to Toronto and the waterfront, and mixing music and food, and then I got to travel and tour a whole bunch, like in the States. I got to see Los Angeles a whole bunch, and Chicago and New York, and it was fun. And then I got to go to South America and do a tour. The Canada Council graciously supported me on this tour. And So yeah, so I got those are fun.
I actually saw a video of you serenading an older woman, and she seemed to be in heaven. And you really showcased those runner's lungs that you have, because you held this note at the end that was like unbelievable. But
I think it was Bryna Wasserman, actually. She was a powerhouse in Montreal. She herself was a director of the Siegel Center there.
Okay.
And yeah, I got to go to they had a jazz festival and something else, and I got to bring my musicians there, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you had a very rock star vibe about you, the way you performed, for sure. You got some huge applause at the end. It was awesome. I have a couple of fun questions for you. One I ask everybody this season at the end of the episode, but I've got one before that because I read that you were a craft beer enthusiast, much like myself. So I'm going to present you with a hypothetical flight of beers, 4 beers.
Oh boy.
And tell me what order you would drink them, assuming that you're drinking them in the order that you like the beers the most. So
Sure.
You've got a stout, an IPA, a Hefeweizen, and red ale.
Stout,
And why?
an IPA,
Yeah,
a red
Hefty.
ale, and a Hefty, like a Weissen beer.
Yeah. Like the banana type thing. Yeah.
So I would start with the red.
It's hard.
I would start with the Hefeweizen. I would start with.
Yeah.
Because it has that kind of fruitier, like,
Very light.
yeah, totally right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to drink that after any of the other 3. And then I would go to the red ale, because those red ales are interesting because they, even though they're, often dark in color, but they're often like highly carbonated and not super heavy, but they
Usually
certainly
have a bit of a malty backbone.
malty. That's right.
Yeah.
They can give you a bit more malt, but nothing
Caramel.
too. Then I would go to the IPA because then you're just getting into a bit more alcohol, a bit more bitter. Just full body.
Right, hoppy. Yeah.
And it's interesting, right? Because I could see an argument to maybe, like, depending on the stout, because stouts are not always created equal. Some are
True.
big stouts, and some stouts are. I mean, even Guinness is not like. It's a bit like, I'm always surprised actually how carbonated it is. I'm always expecting something. Even I got to go to the Guinness, like, I gave a paper in Dublin a few years ago and got to have a Guinness on the rooftop of the actual brewery, which was freaking awesome. And I felt even there like it was just very light. But no, I would end with the stout just because that's what I end with.
Yeah. I mean, as I wrote this question, I thought, okay, I think most people do tend to go light to dark just because stouts are somewhat of like a dessert beer. That's what we always say. You want to end the night with that because
Sure.
it, really makes you feel kind of hefty. You don't really want to keep drinking after that. But I was curious about the order you would pick for the other ones, and hey, that was fun. So now the final.
I should tell you though. Sorry to interrupt you, but for my birthday. And sorry for all of you that haven't been able to go to a restaurant recently. But for my birthday in April, I was taken to a restaurant here in Stockholm called Vasa, and because they had King Vasa was a kind of beloved king here, and so I live in a place called Vasastan, Vasa city, part of the city. And the bartender was like a beer aficionado, and I put myself in his hands, and he just took me through the whole evening. I mean, it was. I fell asleep on the couch. I mean, that hasn't happened since I was like in front of my son. Like, there were pictures.
Oh, man.
But I'll tell you, when someone knows their stuff,
Yeah.
and I mean, it was a dream. Like, it was like I met on a journey. Yeah. It was so that for me is like the ideal night out is someone like that just knows what they have.
Yeah. A real
and just put myself in their hands. Anyway, so that's a great question. Thanks for asking.
That sounds like a blast of a night. Yeah. The last question I do have for you is a one we've been asking everyone this season, which is, if you could have dinner with anyone alive or dead that you've never met before, who would it be and why?
Oh my God, what a great question. If I could have dinner with anybody alive or dead, who would it be and why?
Someone you've never met, though. I had to specify that because I didn't want people just saying, relatives who had passed away and that kind of thing. I'm sure there's probably a few that are floating around and battling it out in your head right now.
Maybe. Who would I, alive or dead, that I've never met? I mean, I met Mandy Patinkin, but we didn't have dinner together. But I wouldn't mind sitting down with him and having dinner.
Yeah, we've made a few exceptions for people's answers. As long as you make a good case for it, it's all good.
Well, I mean, this is maybe a bit of it's not just one person, but I would have liked to have known my grandfather's family that was taken away from him. You know, that I mean, there's probably lots of creative people that I would love to kind of rack their brain around, but you know, the memory, the feeling of like people that couldn't be named, you know, and I tell this in the podcast, like my grandfather couldn't even say their names out loud.
I feel like at this point you should give some context because people who haven't heard that, it's very heartbreaking stuff.
Well, I mean, it's a familiar story that my grandfather's family, I think in the early 1930s, moved from Vilnius, where the family was, Vilnius, Lithuania, where the family had been for hundreds of years, moved for work. So they lived in a town of Molodechno in Belarus for about 8 years or so, which was the lead up. Already by that point, I guess the Nazi party was a thing. And so to make a long story short, my grandfather, the Russian army, the Red Army, set up camp in Molodechno. They had barracks there. They conscripted all the young, able-bodied men, including my grandfather, who was a young man at the time. And then when the war heated up and the Nazis basically were moving east, they took all the soldiers further east into Russia, including my grandfather, and the rest of his family were still in Molodechno and they were all shot.
Good.
And I'll tell a story about this as an adjunct, actually, which I'll try and be brief around, but was very moving for me. I tear up thinking about it. I went to a conference in Vienna, and a lot of the psychology conferences, they have talent nights. So people that like me maybe are performers in another life, and so a bunch of people are classic pianists by whatever. People have talents that are also professionals in other fields. So they paired me with this psychiatrist, a German psychiatrist who's a piano player for this evening. And we wanted to have lunch together just to kind of go over music, get to know each other. And so we meet and we're sitting and we're talking, and I don't know how we got onto it, but it turns out that his grandfather was in the SS. So his grandfather was a Nazi.
Holy shit.
And his grandfather went through Belarus and ended up on his way back when the Russians were pushing back. His grandfather ended up getting shot by either Jewish or Polish partisans. And we sat there and we looked at each other and we were like, it is not inconceivable my grandfather's family was shot and his grandfather was doing the shooting.
Yeah, that's messed up.
And we both held hands and we started bawling. And I felt for this man because I'm sitting there and I could tell that, like, I could feel the warmth that he had for his own grandfather. Because he talked about imagining all these years. This man must be in his 60s. He said to me that he'd imagined for many years his grandfather like in a bog. Like that's how he sees his grandfather's body in a bog somewhere, just lying. That's always the image that he had. And you know what he told me? He said that in decades that this image has been fixed. And when we spoke for the first time in his life, he felt his grandfather's body move. Like he had this feeling of like his grandfather's body being animated for the first time.
Wow. And
then we performed together. I have the video of this. We he played and I sang at this like cool evening and so that, I think that somewhere in me, it'd be really just cool to talk to these people. Cause it's like a void, it's like something was kind of cut short. And their names are on his tombstone in Toronto. So that's nice that they ended up somewhere.
But definitely, that's an amazing answer. I mean, I get it. They're lost to the ages. It would be amazing to be able to connect with them. And that story about you and the other gentleman, that was just magical. So thank you so much for sharing that, man.
Yeah, we kept in touch. We kept in touch. So that's
jam sometime. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, well, thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart, this was so fun. It was so great getting to know you. And I really had a blast.
You too. Thank you for having me on.
I know you got up early and it's late where you are. So get to bed, man.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care.
Man. Take it easy.
Nice to meet you. Ciao.
Yeah, you too, dude.
Bye.